Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Matt Chat. I'm David Mirikitani. Today it is my pleasure to be joined by the head coach from the University of Nebraska, going into his 18th season, Mr. Mark Manning. Coach, thanks so much for taking the time to be with me today.
You bet, Dave. It's an honor. It's great to be on your show.
I really appreciate it. It was good to get to visit with you in Vegas, and certainly want to dive into some of the stuff that happened there and talk about your program. Sometimes I put questions out. I tell people who I'm going to interview, and a good friend of mine, he came up with a really good question, and it's probably where I should start. You know, if you don't mind, tell me how you got started in coaching, and who are some of the people that really had a big influence on you at the beginning of your career?
Well, interesting. I always knew I wanted to be a coach. I thought I'd be a coach at a high school level. When I was in high school, I had really good high school coaches that really impacted my life. But then, you know, when I went to college, I went to Nebraska, and then I transferred to UNO, and I had the pleasure to be around a guy like Mike Denny, who has been a great influence on my life and my career in college. And then, you know, I had an opportunity to go to a couple different places. I wanted to wrestle after college and compete internationally, which I did for about 6 years. And Bill Lamb reached out to me through Rich Lorenzo was a head coach at Penn State at the time. They were talking to me, and Bobby Douglas, Coach Douglas down at Arizona State. So I had some options to where to go, and it just worked out great for me to go to North Carolina. And Bill Lamb was, has made a big impact on my life and my career, and just is a really good mentor. And I coached with Coach Lamb for 8 years at North Carolina, so I had other opportunities to go other places during that 8 years. But thank God, Coach Lamb, talked me out of some of those places and made me look, big picture. And so he was really good, taught me a lot about obviously the profession and, how to recruit and relate to people. And we had some great teams and some great times down there. So it was really impactful. I got my master's and off I went.
Yeah, you've got a chance to rub elbows and learn from some of the legends of the sport, and you can tell that you've learned those lessons well. And you've also really developed yourself into a really high-level freestyle coach. And tell me a little bit about, I mean, it's hard to find somebody to coach the coaches. So what kind of things have you done there to continue to be cutting edge and to be so good at that guys like JB and JG trust you, so completely?
Yeah, I think it really started when, just after my college years and me as a freestyle wrestler, I had some really tough opponents at 68 kilos. And I was obviously never on the Olympic team or world team, but, during those 6 years, I gave it my all. I invested everything in my training and competing. I competed overseas a lot and had an opportunity to learn from a lot of the greats. Obviously, Dave Schultz was one of my coaches for a couple trips. So I picked his brain. I coached at Oklahoma, and Dave and his wife, Nancy, obviously, her folks were professors at OU. So Dave would come into town. I picked Dave's brain. We'd work out together. And just, obviously being around John Smith, being around, Bruce Burnett, Bobby Douglas on a lot of trips. So just that, along with being just a wrestling nut, as far as, wanting to be the best, you seek and have a passion for the sport. So when I'm overseas, I'm watching what the Russians, I'm watching what the Iranians, I'm watching what the Azerbaijan guys, how they train, how they warm up, every aspect. And so just constantly picking things up and trying to take the good from people. And, obviously, I don't know who invented the inside trip, but it wasn't the latest guy who did the inside trip at the U.S. Open. A lot of guys, Ricky Saunders or someone,
right,
learned it from someone and they passed it down. But so, I think those are valuable lessons that I've just been impacted being around a lot of good coaches and a lot of good people.
Yeah, and we have mutual friends, and a lot of those folks tell me what a student of the game you are, and you can really hear that in just your philosophy about things. So kind of with that as a background, and we'll get into your guys here in a minute, but what were your overall thoughts about the U.S. Open here, recently here in Vegas?
I thought it was great. I thought, if you look at, it's highly competitive. People realize, this game, this sport we're in, it's highly competitive. And when you put people in this sport in a venue for 2 days, and you're fighting out to make the world team or the first process,
right?
And if you really look at it, you got 3 medalists in Logan Stever and Jaden Cox and Kyle Schneider not in the field, not at Vegas last weekend. It really bodes well for USA Wrestling in the future, because
right.
There's a lot of good young talent, and there's a lot of guys out there fighting, to prove themselves and, want to be a world champion. It's, I think, it's a lot different than it was 6, 7, 8 years ago when we weren't a powerhouse, worldwide. Now I think you see even in the juniors, there's a lot of great juniors. Obviously, Mark Hall, Dayton Fix, just a couple of those guys as far as,
right.
Gable Stevenson, guys that are going to be, moving forward, the next few quads. So it's exciting, but it's competitive.
Yeah, and we talked about this yesterday, Andy Hamilton and I, and maybe coming from you, it would mean more. My point was, if you're a fan of wrestling, it might be just as cool to go to that tournament, the U.S. Open, and then the World Team Trials and the Greco and the women's, than the NCAAs in terms of how much more accessible the athletes are and just how many top-level guys and gals were competing. I mean, would you kind of agree with that from a fan's point of view, that was a pretty awesome weekend?
Yes, most definitely. I mean, if you look at, all the weight classes, but 65 kilos, when you look at, a guy like Jimmy Kennedy, who I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure what he placed, but when you got guys like that, Jordan Oliver and Frank Molinaro and just, I mean, it's high level, and it's, really what you see is there's not as much, there's just so much more maturity on the international level, because people don't fear, whatever name is out there. Sometimes in NCAA tournament,
right.
People fear people, so much, and wow, he's ranked first and this guy's ranked 12th. It's going to be a pushover, and he usually is. But that's not the case. It comes down to, preparing yourself and being confident in your talent, your skills, and then going out and displaying it. And you really see that at U.S. Open. It's like, okay, you won it. Doesn't matter if you won 2 NCAA titles. Someone's going to kick the snot out of you. You better be ready to compete.
Yeah, Andy pointed out that at 74 kilos alone, there were 3 Hodge winners in that weight class. And,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, he's really good at seeing that from that 50,000-foot view. And I think there was, probably if Hall wrestles in the World Team Trials at that same weight, they'll probably end up being 4. I think that guy will probably get at least 1 before he's done. So, yeah, your point about the depth is well taken. As one of our country's leading freestyle coaches, and we're just going to focus on that for right now, what performances or results were encouraging to you or surprising from the U.S. Open?
I think we're building depth at 57 kilos. I think Tony Ramos really, I thought he's really stepped up his game. I think he's learning new skills, and I think he's really evolving. And, I think that's a huge positive, for USA Wrestling, for our sport. And, I just think up and down the lineup, I think Quiz, a guy like Quiz really has improved. Obviously he's wrestled a lot, this last year and a half, 18 months, freestyle, getting international competition. You know, I notice all those things. I think David Taylor has really, upped his game. He looks great at 86 kilos. And just, I'm really impressed. Obviously, Jaden Cox there too. So
yeah,
I just think, I'm just really encouraged to see there's a lot of good young guys out there that are really, have a bright future. And I think, our sport's in a great place, moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe one of the main takeaways from this weekend were the new rules and how they're being interpreted by the officials. And, you're obviously, I think for those of us that follow folk style most of the year, some of these rules seem even crazier, but you're a guy that obviously has one foot in each world. What are your thoughts about the new rules and the interpretations of them?
Well, I think it's anytime you make some new set of rules, there's going to be some, it's going to take some time to iron out the details as far as is how, how are they going to call it at the World Championships? How are they going to call it at U.S. Open? How are they going to call it, the European Championships is in Serbia this week. How are they going to call it there? And then what feedback from those coaches in Europe? What's going to be different than how they called it U.S. Open?
Yeah.
And so I think just making sure, that's Les Gutchins, Rich Bender's job, and I'm sure they're on it, and more than on it. I've heard they're on it. So
they're probably on it.
I think there's a lot of people, worry about all this stuff, that they're doing their job. I know they're already on top of those things and communicating, what we saw at the U.S. Open, how it was, it's tough to be official, I think, on the collegiate level, high school level, or international level. It's, especially when you throw some new rules and you don't, you get in funky situations that cause people to have to make a decision. And then, it's not as quite black and white as it is when you're talking about it in the meeting room. And then you get out there on the mat and you're, forced to make a call like a Jordan Oliver, Zane Rutherford call at,
Yeah.
So that's, and the, the caution and two, is that worth as much as a takedown? I don't think so. And I think they're going to iron that out. I think, obviously they don't want to reward someone for a, 2 and a caution by fleeing the mat, give it more value than a takedown. I don't think that was their intent, but that's kind of how it played out sometimes. So I think, they're going to have to iron some of those things out. And I think, hopefully by August, when we go to France, they have those things, a little bit more. We know what we're going to get, how it's going to be called,
Sure. Well, it's funny. I'm feeling better and better about the podcast Andy Hamilton and I did, because the two subjects we talked about were the correct throw at 65 and how, hands to the face shouldn't be worth more than a takedown. So the fact that you're talking about those leads me to believe my career in this might last another week or two. So that's comforting for me, Coach. I appreciate it. I know you didn't come on to make me feel better about myself, but I appreciate it. So, anyway, what are your thoughts about the world and Olympic medalists sitting out to the 2 out of 3? I know you've obviously coached Jordan, and for years he was that guy, and you mentioned Stieber and Cox and Scheider. Do you feel like that's good for putting the best guys on the team? Do you feel like, those guys should have to wrestle this year? It's a different year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think people have to understand why those policies were kind of put in place, and have to think about when Zeke Jones took over as national coach back in 2009 or 8. We weren't too good in freestyle wrestling right then, and we had a lack of depth. We had a lack of talent, and I don't think that was not Kevin Jackson's fault or anyone's fault. It's just we had a lot of guys a lot of our really good wrestlers were going in MMA and mixed martial arts. And I think we, as a country, we lost a talent base. If you look at from 1996 or 2000 to 2008, somewhere in there, we lost. Our wrestling just wasn't very good, period.
Yeah.
And that wasn't Kevin's fault. That was just what Zeke took over. And then once we had some success, he wanted to really reward those guys to make sure, hey, we were getting some medals. And so, got to start at one first, and so he wanted to create a little bit of a blanket to say, hey, if this guy's a world medalist, the next year does he have to prove himself again when it's really tough in America to make a world Olympic team? It's a tough process.
Correct.
And so we're in Azerbaijan and Russia, and we're not comparing ourselves, but we are at the end of the day because we want to be the best. And so to be the best, we want to make sure our policies and processes is, putting ourselves in the best position to be successful. And so it's a tough dynamic, but I think it's good. I think it really, really rewards. It's giving that guy a cherry on top to say, hey, if you're a world Olympic medalist, world champion, you get to sit out the next year. Do you get to, hey, if you're not doing your job, you're going to get beat out.
That's
and
right.
So
yeah.
It doesn't give a guy a free pass to make the team every year, like I think sometimes people make it out to be, but it's still, it's a tough dynamic, any way you see it, but, I like it. I think it's good.
Yeah. And I think I agree with you that, the years when Jordan was in that spot, if he had gone and had a poor tournament or obviously didn't have the Olympics he wanted, now he has to go through the tournament. And,
Yep.
So it's not like, well, we're just picking this guy because we like him and he's got endorsements. It's really based on performance. So I think I think in any job, if people looked at it in their own job and they were an accountant or they were a school teacher and they did a great job the year before and they didn't have to go through all the, training of the people that weren't as good as them, I think they'd go, yeah, that seems fair. So, yeah.
Well, we're training people to be the best in the world at what they do. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what Zeke had the foresight to see, and really wanted to implement that with Rich. And I think it's good because I think, it's a tough dynamic to be a world Olympic champion. We can't take that for granted, and we want to reward that aspect.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So, I have not a significant, but a somewhat of a relationship with James Green. I know him all the way back from high school. He was friends with Jamel Jones and those guys when they were on my team. And how has James made the adjustment to the senior level so successfully? He was obviously a really good college wrestler, but almost everybody else you see that's winning big time won an NCAA title. And I know he's a 4-time All-American, but he obviously had to overcome having not won that mentally to going to I can be the best guy in the world and taking third. How has he made that adjustment so successfully?
I think he's just, if you know James's past, his high school wrestling team actually doesn't even exist. Winslow Township doesn't have a wrestling program right now at high school level.
Wow.
And so, so he didn't have a lot of structure coming out of high school. So when he came to Nebraska, and then when you put someone in a lot of structure, they either do really well and they adjust or they don't. And it takes people, a couple of years to figure it out in college. And so James really adapted well. And he really trusted Coach Schneider and myself. And obviously he had another guy, guys around in the room as far as, Jordan. Jordan's a few years older, but he saw hey, Jordan wasn't a beast coming out of high school. Actually, a lot of people don't even realize Jordan Burroughs didn't wrestle his first freestyle match until 2008. So,
he's on the Jaden Cox. Those guys are on the same path where they just wrestle as few as possible and kill everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think with James, I think he's a really quick learner. He's a good learner as far as he picks things up easy, and he's, he just adapts well. And I think James really just bought into our program, our program's designed, sure every program's going to say they work really hard, but James just really bought into that. I think it really paid off for him. Obviously he wasn't a national champion, which still eats at him. That still drives him to be the best. Those things drive people when they don't achieve what they want and what they were after. Obviously it broke his heart, man. He's a competitor. And so to be a world champion, he's on a mission, and he really wants it. He wants to be the best in the world, and not just this year, but moving forward. And he trains like it, and he's developed that attitude. And I think that's something we do pretty good developing that aspect.
Yeah, I think your track record speaks for itself there. And I know, I'm my dad. I know you guys are friends, and I'm the son of a coach. And, coaches look at things differently. They don't just look at you won or you lost. So obviously James won. How did you feel overall about his performance winning the bracket?
I thought pretty dominant. He was pretty dominant. He led up a couple times, last match and some in the semis. And, he's just got to be able to finish matches out strong. This is being critical of James, but he did so many things well, and he's a beast. His position is really tough, and him and Jordan scrap a lot in the wrestling room, and Jordan has a hard time scoring on James Green. So
wow,
that really gives James a lot of confidence, I think. But
it would give me a lot of confidence if I could run from him that long. Yeah.
James is really strong. He's strong, and he just thinks in a different pattern than he did a few years ago. He's thinking like he's going to be a world champion, and usually those things come to you. And so he's a pro, I would say. He's a pro at what he does, and he takes that mindset that, hey, I'm going to be the best in the world,
Yeah.
And I have a guy here in the room that has been doing it, and I'm going to learn from him. He's really picked up a lot of things from Jordan, and Jordan's really helped him, and vice versa. And I think that dynamic of Jordan really giving himself to help James really improve in November and December, ready himself for the World Championships. I think that really drives him.
Yeah, they seem like they have this really cool dynamic where, like big brother, little brother, but just like, like that, like brothers where I'm sure they fight, but nobody else is allowed to say anything bad about the other guy, and they love each other to death. So it's awesome.
It's really neat.
Yeah. So speaking of Burroughs, he really seemed like he was on a mission. He shut down his social media, super focused, got the title. As his coach, what were some high points and some areas of improvement you saw from his performances at the Open?
I think his mind was free, and he really, it's a tough dynamic being Jordan Burroughs at these things, because like say the U.S. Open, from the standpoint of a lot of fans and a lot of young people coming up to him, wanting pictures and autographs. You wouldn't think that's that big a deal, but it can get you your focus, not where it needs to be. And I think Jordan did a good job with that and dealing with, his request from that standpoint, but just getting himself focused for each match. And I thought from the first match to the last match, he really kept good poise, good focus. We got some things we got to work on, and and gotta move on. Get better.
Well, and he got the title, and ultimately, at the end of the day, that's if you can not wrestle your best and get that done, really, that gives you even more hope that you can maybe widen the gap. So, I'm actually pretty good friends with Randy Couture, and I watch his life, and we had breakfast there one morning, and he had to take 5 pictures before he could have his coffee, and I told him, I said, I'd like your life for like 1 week. And then I want to go back to being me. And I think people don't really, understand that. It sounds like it's awesome, but, I'm sure Jordan deals with that, at the same, if not even a crazier level, especially when you guys go overseas. So to me, from the outside, what makes Burroughs special is that he's really talented, but that he works like he's not talented. Am I right? Am I wrong? And in your mind, what makes him so special and different?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way to put it, Dave. I think his work ethic and his discipline with lifting and drilling in the morning and going the extra yard in the afternoon. I just think his total package is great. He's really just concentrating on from that standpoint. You have to put that work to use when you go into competition. Making sure you warm up, making sure your mind's right, but making sure warm up and you're ready to go, because 6 minutes goes fast and you don't want to get caught. Oh man, I wasn't ready. My first 2 minutes wasn't good. And so, we're just really working on that aspect. And so, I think Jordan is, he's ready to make another push.
Yeah, he almost looks like he's been refreshed, like his energy level is different and, probably being able to get away from some of those other outside pullaways or distractions. It's a horrible way to have that happen, but it almost seems like it's made it easier for him to be even more focused. So I would be remiss if I don't ask you, what were your thoughts on the final match with him and Dake?
Obviously a hard fought match. Kyle is, we got utmost respect for Kyle Dake. He's a winner, and then he's a tremendous competitor, and he's going to always be ready to go. That's the way he's made. He's like Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
And so we're always expecting him to give his best, and we just got to do a good job. If we meet up with Kyle again, let's say in June, got to be ready to go, and got to make some adjustments that way. But he wrestled a hard fought match, and Jordan came out on the good end. Yeah,
for sure. And I think what's crazy to me about Dake is the guy moved up 26 pounds and came a whisker away from making the Olympic team. He's probably never weighed 189 in his life. So, I think that people need to understand that Burroughs is wrestling a guy that's pretty frickin' special, in his own right. So,
sure.
I want to thank you for at least one thing. You helped connect me with Bryan Scheider earlier this year, and he was on my show, and he was an awesome guest. And, when I talk to him or I hear JB or James talk about you, they all talk about how much you care about them and just how much attention you pay to detail, to the smallest things, the incremental things that help these guys improve. Because I think in any sport or any task, your learning curve is really steep in the beginning, and then it tends to flatten out, and you almost have to find ways to challenge yourself. Those guys, I know, see that as one of your main strengths. What do you see your strengths and maybe areas of improvement as a coach about yourself?
Well, I think as a coach, I think you're always getting better. You're getting worse. You got to always have to be improving. I think, that's just always been my mentality. And everything I do, every camp I go to, I try to pick up something from people, because everyone, is knowledgeable, and I just have respect for people that, are in the sport. And there's, obviously more than one way to do something, but people have things to share. And I think I'm always trying to to learn from people. And, but from the standpoint of, I just, I study a lot of tape. I watch what's being done. And so try to implement that and expose Jordan and James, my other guys to they want to be world class and elite level. This is the way you have to do it. And you have to be ready for these things and you have to improve in these areas. And, I just try to put together really good practice plans and from that standpoint and make sure we're giving these guys the best information and best way to approach things. But, I have a passion for the sport, obviously, and
sure,
love what I do. And I'm going to, maybe one of the attributes as far as me, I just really invest in my guys. I think there's coaches out there that do things different than me, but what I do, and if people want to come to Nebraska, they're going to get a coach that's investing in them as a student athlete. And it's not just for the 5 years, it's for life. And so, I say it and try to live it,
You're leading me into something I'm going to ask you in a minute because one of my ex guys is one of your ex guys, so we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So I want to touch on one other thing, and then I want to talk about Nebraska. Tell me how great. I don't know how to even say this right. Tell me the level of respect you have for Bryan Scheider, not only as a coach but as a guy that literally he told me how not fun it is to wrestle with Green and Burroughs every day, but he was very humble about it. I think he probably does better than he says he does, but I mean, it's got to just be unbelievable to watch that guy get in there and work out with these guys and continue to make them better. And even if he has to, go home in ice packs once in a while, right?
Yeah, for sure. Bryan's super. He's the great thing is, about being in coaching, you get to see guys, go from, young men to men, right? And
absolutely.
I had an opportunity to coach Bryan for a couple of years. And then, he got in academia and got his PhD, his master's, and then came back to the sport. He's a student of the game. He's a guy who very successful, being a 4-time All-American himself, 4-time Big 12 champion. He could have made probably World Olympic teams. I really think he could have. It just wasn't his passion. And so he didn't put his energy that way. But, when Bryan Scheider decided to be a coach, he was all in. And he's, 100% in. And he's got, obviously similar philosophy that I have. He's invested in our guys, And so Jordan Burroughs and James Green train here, but we treat them just like they're, college guys as far as, from what their needs are,
Right.
And obviously they're grown men, but we treat them from the standpoint of what they need, what they're doing, how their off the mat life's going too. And so I think that's really important, and a lot of people don't know this, but when Jordan Burroughs became a world Olympic champion, 2011, 2012, that was a really quick thing. He graduated 3 months later, won the world championships, got some money in his pocket. He was single then, as far as, $50,000, but after taxes, you get about 37. He's like, what's this? 30. I said, buddy, it's real life now. That's,
Uncle FICA.
So, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Got to find him a tax guy and got to get him someone who invests his money and someone's going to take care of him, from that standpoint, that's so we look big picture from that standpoint, helping people.
Yeah.
These are things that professionals do. And this is how you got to handle things. And so just help him be successful in his life, But Bryan he's a pro, man. He's great. He's turned down a lot of head coaches' jobs to stay here at Nebraska. Obviously, he loves our place and just believes in what, the values and principles of what we teach as far as our whole university. And, Eastern PA guy being in the Midwest is great. He
doesn't hurt recruiting, right?
Yeah, he's great, man. He's great in every aspect. Blessed to have him, and he's a colleague, but he's more than that. He's a great friend, and he's just can't say enough about him. He's got a great heart for our guys and for our people, and obviously for James and Jordan. And they love him, and it's all good. He's had some challenges in his life that I won't go into that even makes his character even more appealing, which is amazing.
It's hard to even imagine. Yeah. He was super. He's got the look of a smart guy, just even the posture and the glasses and all that. And, but then you talk to him and you're like, okay, he actually is as smart as he looks. And then was a stud wrestler on top of it. You're like, good Lord, there's nothing this guy's bad at. And then he's from PA, so he can recruit out East. And then he's in the Midwest. I'm like, good Lord, this was a gigantic get for Mark and that program there. And the relationship between the four of you guys is really cool. I mean, how he talks about you guys, and, I hear the interviews about how Jordan and James talk about just how you guys all talk about each other is really cool. So, I want to jump over to your team, your college team. I had a chance to have Renneria in my charity event, and he's a cool kid. His dad's awesome, crazy awesome, but an awesome dude. And you guys have some big, you guys had a good season, but you got some big guys, big names coming out of redshirt or coming into the program. Guys like Chad Redd and Bo Bresky and Labriola and Renneria. Tell me a little bit about your recruits, your redshirts, and what you think the season's going to look like and the roster's going to look like for you guys this year.
Well, we're real excited because I'm sure a lot of people don't expect us to do much, but guys like CJ has really had a good year, just academically, and just getting better skill wise and becoming a better college wrestler. He's wrestling at university, so he's going to get his feet wet and try to get his feet in the door at UWW juniors. So, but Bo Bresky had a knee injury, in November, and he's recovering, but he's doing a great job. Guys like Taylor Venz just placed at Las Vegas. Eric Schultz, I'm really, really excited about those guys. Besides, obviously, Mikey Labriola and Jason Renteria and the other guys in our program, but we have guys like Luke Weber, Johnny Blankenship, guys that came within a match. Well, Luke Weber placed at UWW and Johnny Blankenship, Dalton Peters. So Colin Parrington is a guy who wrestled a lot for us at 149. Colton McChrystal coming back. Obviously, Tyler Berger, All-American coming back. He's really made a jump, I think, in his wrestling.
For sure, yeah.
From last year to this year, but I think he's going to make another jump. He already has, to me, since the NCAA tournament. It's working out with Jordan and James, and his belief and confidence and maturity is going in the right direction, and those are all good things moving forward. So we're really excited about our future. Got a lot of good guys, but it's about developing and helping, just take their wrestling to another level. So, we got our work cut out this summer, but, it's great when you have kids that are passionate like yourself that want to be the best. And, these guys are really going to be fun to work with.
Yeah, you guys are going to be good for a long time. So when you and Snyder and Powell and the rest of your staff are recruiting, what are some of the main things you're looking for when you're like, look, we want this guy to come to Nebraska? Well,
just kids that are really excited about the sport, want to be the best. And I think there's some guys want to be the best in high school and then want to be best at world or best in college. Not everyone's going to be a world Olympic champion,
Sure.
There's some guys out there I'm talking to right now. They're not really freestyle guys, which is fine. It's great. It doesn't matter to me as long as their passion is about being the best in the college ranks. And so, being invested in the sport, but most of all, really wanting to be invested in themselves, about, helping themselves become a complete person. What I mean by that is college, you got to be a student athlete. You
Right.
got to be a student first. And then, but along with that is developing yourself as a man. And so, guys that want to be the best in whatever they want to go into, 10, 20 years from now. And hopefully we're going to teach them the lessons and how to do that. They're not always going to be national champions or, All-Americans. Some guys, leave our program and it's like, man, they weren't an All-American, they weren't a national champion, but are they a world champion dad? Are they a world champion to their wife?
Yeah.
I'd say a guy like Tim Lambert, he never reached his goals, but he's an awesome person, and everyone, his parents are blessed to have him because he's a world-class kid. He was never national champion or All-American, lost out a couple times, really tough, tight matches, but, that's God's plan. I got a lot of faith in Tim Lambert and what he's made of, and he's going to be all right.
Yeah, and he's going to be a blessing to people in other walks of life, for sure.
That's right. And that's how I look at guys. I don't judge them by, my God, they didn't get the result I recruited them for. Sure, I want them to have success, you bet. But, sometimes it's not in the cards. And so for whatever reason, but I'm going to love them the same way, man. Guys that come out of my program, I just have a lot of respect for them because it's demanding.
Yeah, and it's perfect segue. For people that don't know, Jason High wrestled. He was at Blue Springs High School, wrestled for Coach Haggerty, and then we recruited him at Merrimack, and then he went on and wrestled for you, and now he has a successful fight career, and he actually has a big fight coming up in late June, and I'm actually going to swing through Kansas City and bring Jason up with me to the World Team Trials, and it was cool. I sent you a text, and I was like, hey, Jason's coming with me. Can, we get some training in, work on some of his cage work and judo, and literally 2 minutes later, sure, when do you want to be there, and I think that says a lot about you. And, you don't really get anything out of whether Jason trains or not, but you mentioned, your relationships for life with these guys. And, when I told Jason that, he's like, man, that's cool. I get to see Coach again. And I think that's a real testament to how you feel about those guys and how they feel about you.
Yeah, it's great. And it's big picture. Obviously, we all want to win at the highest level and, want to win national titles, but Penn State's got that aspect going right now.
Sure, but everybody's going to chip away and do their thing, and that's what should happen. And competition is what drives good to great and great to phenomenal. So, lastly, for people that haven't been to Lincoln, maybe tell people I think maybe people have a pretty good idea that the wrestling is going to be phenomenal, but tell us maybe a little about the location, the Devaney Center, I want to pronounce it correctly, and then the Haymarket or whatever. Some of these, the spots are that people can really enjoy Lincoln in June.
Yeah, it's Lincoln's 280,000 people here, so sometimes people think Lincoln, Nebraska is just this tiny little town out in the middle of the cornfields. Depending on where you live, there's cornfields in Indiana, there's cornfields in Michigan, there's cornfields
in Missouri. we got them too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's in Ohio. There's a lot of cornfields, but I think it's from the standpoint is once you come to Lincoln, it's a friendly environment. People are really friendly. Number one, the Haymarket, like you mentioned, they built 6 years ago. They built a big arena down there. Pinnacle Bank Arena brings a lot of great events to Lincoln, Nebraska, concerts and all kinds of truck shows and all kinds of events to Pinnacle Bank, and that really drives the Haymarket area. There's a lot of great hotels and a lot of great places to eat down there, a lot of great entertainment. Then just, that's very close, the Haymarket area, to our campus. So it's really literally right across the street.
Nice.
And so the Bob Devaney Center, Tom Osborne, when he was our athletic director 6 years ago, sucked $50 million into the Bob Devaney Center. And so it's all renovated. And our basketball team, men and women, play down at the Pinnacle Bank. They practice here, but the competition site is used basically for wrestling, gymnastics, and volleyball. And so it's seats like 8,800. It's a really tight arena. It's the fans are going to be. It's going to be just a tremendous event because the fans are going to be right on top of the wrestlers. It'd be great access. There's a lot of scoreboards up in the arena, so it's a high tech venue, I would say. But the Bob Devaney Center it's great. It's going to be great for the wrestlers because our indoor track is right off that complex. It's going to be used for warm up area, practice area. So I think fans, June 9th and 10th, weather's going to be great. It's going to be a great event, and I think fans are really going to enjoy Lincoln, Nebraska, as far as the weather, the food, the entertainment, and just how people are, the friendliness of it.
Yeah, Andy Hamilton and I were talking about how the attendance at the U.S. Open and the World Team Trials are obviously nowhere near they are for the NCAAs, but you really just get the cream of the crop from the NCAAs at this event. Like we were saying at 74, 3 Hodge winners in one weight. So I have no skin in the game, but I personally would suggest anybody who can make it to Lincoln for those dates should really try to do so. I mean, hotels are pretty affordable. The tickets are not outrageous. And I mean, it's amazing how many freaking superstars are running around there, not only the athletes, but the coaches and everything else. So I hope you guys have a great turnout for it, Coach.
Yeah, and I think, even on the junior, it's really streamlined this year as far as UWW juniors are going to be on Friday, June 9th. All the juniors and junior world team will be decided on Friday night, and then Saturday, all the seniors. So
yeah, it's cool, right?
It's a great event, and for freestyle fans out there, wrestling fans to come watch. Obviously, we already know Gable Stevenson, Mark Hall, Dayton Fix. Those guys are all going to be the future of our sport. They're all going to be wrestling besides all these other young studs.
Yeah.
And then the seniors
Valencia,
next day.
those guys, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so then you get, all the senior level guys that, past NCAA champions and Hodge Award winners, but guys that are going to represent, our country moving forward. So I think it's going to be just a terrific event and really encourage people to get out there. It's going to be, some super wrestling.
Yeah, I agree. And Coach, I just want to publicly thank you for your support and friendship to my family and me over the years. It means a lot to me personally, and want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And I'm sure you know this, but I wish you, your coaching staff, your program, and in the short term, your senior guys, the best of luck. And Jason High and my dad and I will see you next month in Lincoln, okay?
That sounds great, Dave. Appreciate it, and thanks for having us on. I really appreciate what you do, and thanks for what you do for the sport.
Thank you, Coach. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the head coach from the University of Nebraska, Mark Manning. This was Matt Chat. We'll speak to you all next week.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.